Hello and welcome to the round so far for round 3, brought to you by AAMI Insurance. I'm joined by Kate McCarthy. We've just watched two absolute Saturday night classics take place and perhaps a look ahead to what September could look like later this year with four incredible teams going at it. I mean, we'll start with what was the preliminary final rematch. It was almost a replay, 10 points the difference last year, just 9 points. And if you couldn't tell by Kate McCarthy's maroon get-up, it was the Lions that got up and all Australian yourself there at the Lions. What did you make of this performance tonight from them?
Yeah, I think it is quite reminiscent of the prelim final, as you said, Xander. There were ebbs and flows in momentum. There were times where a team, the Lions, would kick back and then the Cats would kick away again. But it's an impressive performance from the Lions purely because now in their first 3 fixtures, they've been down at half-time in each of those games and they've been able to just find something and fight back. And obviously you don't want to be playing your best football in round 3 and they're far from that, as are the Cats. But they're 3-0 in the right way this time. Last year it was 0-3, so it's a complete flip of that script. So it's probably not the most convincing that we've seen the Lions play, but as I said, this isn't when you want to be playing your best football. And just having a look at some of their numbers. So 26 points down at halftime tonight, 24 points down last week against the Eagles, and 13 points down at halftime against Sydney. And they've gone on to win those second halves and win the matches. Reminiscent
of their finals campaign as well, where they came from behind so often. One man that was so important in that campaign last year, of course, was Will Ashcroft, the Norm Smith medalist, and he was great tonight after maybe an underwhelming first 2 weeks. He's fought back through some criticism as well.
Yeah, he certainly has, and I think the thing that probably was most impressive tonight was some wet weather conditions, and he was just really clean by hand. And that's sort of, the wet weather conditions sometimes separates the players that are cleanest underfoot and those that sort of are two-grab players. And to have 33 disposals, 15 of those contested, 5 clearances and a goal to go with it in pretty tough conditions up at the Gabba. Very impressive, and laid some tackles, some important tackles too, to earn himself some free kicks. So, yeah, a good performance from him this evening.
Where do you think it leaves the Cats at this stage of the season? 1 and 2, obviously 9-point loss to the reigning premiers is no disaster. Last week's probably the one that went begging, but what do you make of their next 3 games? They've got Melbourne, Adelaide and then Hawthorn on Easter Monday. 2 of those pretty tough matchups. Yeah,
they are, and we've seen sort of, I think we'll touch on Melbourne a little bit later, but that should be a winnable game for Geelong. The Geelong we saw this evening though, not the Geelong we saw last week at Marvel Stadium. I think keep in mind still Tom Stewart didn't play tonight. Obviously the laid out, was named in the squad, travelled up to Brisbane, didn't play, but there's still a few things to add back to that mix. I don't think Jeremy Cameron's quite playing his best football just yet. Kicked 4 goals in round 1, but we haven't really seen the best of him yet. So I don't think there's any concerns really from the Cats. One that they would have loved to win, but a good response from last week.
We'll have a look at the other Saturday night game down in Tasmania where Hawthorn jumped to 4-0. The Giants tasted defeat for the first time, slumping to 2-1. But this one was really tactically intriguing, wasn't it, Kate?
Yeah, it was. I think the first thing to premise on this game is there was a strong breeze towards the left of screen for the entire match, really, down at UTAS, and Hawthorn's ability to score goals against it in the third term, which we're seeing here. Their ability to just change up their tactics a little bit. We saw Luke Bruce has kicked 2 goals in this third term alone. Did a really good job on Sam Taylor, who's just become that matchup every time they play each other. So I think that was important, and I think, it was Gunston, that was playing that role, and that was the most important role for me. But my Saturday King, which is a little bit different than usual, a little bit off Broadway, I'm going to give Sam Mitchell and also the experienced players at Hawthorn, I'm going to give them the Saturday King. Their ability to just turn things around tactically. So in the first term, they gave up 5 goals to zip. And then in the third term, obviously, still against the breeze, they were able to flip that ledger, kicked 4 goals to 2. So had plus 26 disposals, 7 more inside 50s, 16 uncontested possessions. And then that one at the bottom, the most important, plus 13 on the scoreboard. When you're against a sort of what they were calling a 5 to 6 goal breeze, that's a huge turnaround. And a lot of credit has to go to the coaching staff, not just Sam Mitchell, but the coaching staff there, but the senior players as well, to be able to go out and implement that. Very impressed.
So a fantastic night for Sam Mitchell in the coach's box, as you say. What do you make of the game at large and the 2 teams? A bit of a litmus test for both sides heading into the early stage of the season.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything you can take away from GWS. I think they competed really well. I think Hawthorn probably just worked out how to play the conditions a little bit better than they did and reacted a little bit quicker. But I think there was a pretty impressive patch from Will Day, a good sort of few minutes there where he kicked a couple of goals and had a lot of scoreboard impact that kind of ultimately was the difference in the end. But their ability to still match it with the Hawks, who everyone's been raving about for a long time, and they've continued their run of form, 4 and zip, really one of the premier teams in the competition at the moment, and GWS really took it to them.
When it's a two-kick game, you're obviously going to go back and analyse just the moments where it's a game of inches. And there was one moment in that second quarter where Josh Weddle took a mark, or did he? What was your take on how this unfolded? And do you think it had an impact on the game, given, look how far down they were at that stage, and it sort of kick-started that second-term comeback?
Yeah, well, this was the term where they needed to make the most of the breeze, and Josh Weddle was able to go back. And I think until we see it on this slow-mo, it becomes really clear that probably didn't control that all the way down. I'd say that's technically not a mark. It was paid a mark. He was good enough to go back and kick the goal, which you have to be in the moment. So that did really jumpstart their campaign in the second term, though.
From two games that were ultra competitive on the Saturday night, back to the Saturday afternoon, where Melbourne copped a second consecutive 10-goal drubbing, this time at the hands of Gold Coast. It's not looking great for Melbourne at the moment. They lose to North Melbourne, then lose to Gold Coast, who have historically really struggled on the road. What was your early take from this game?
Yeah, well, I was really impressed with the Gold Coast Suns and what we saw from them, their ability to spread out of the midfield, but I was expecting a real bounce back from Melbourne. I thought they were going to be disappointed from last week and really show a whole lot of fight and a lot of grit, and we didn't really see a whole lot of it, to be completely honest. I think they were outplayed through the midfield, which is an area and contest where they pride themselves on at that football club. And yeah, the Gold Coast Suns really own them. And that just leads me into the point. If this was a Melbourne midfield or a Melbourne team's midfield, a club that plays in Melbourne, would we be saying that they're the best midfield in the AFL? I mean, Anderson, Miller, Rao, yes, the two opportunities we've seen them this year, we thought this week would probably be a pretty big challenge for them against that dominant midfield from Melbourne, but they absolutely dominated. So Anderson, 35 and 10 score involvements, Miller, 23 10-score involvements and 3 goals. And then Rao just became a clearance beast. 36 disposals, 13 clearances. 9 of those were from centre bounce. So let's have a look. I want to have a look at Matt Rao here in 2020. So this is when he burst onto the scene, had an extremely good first few matches, and then obviously had that shoulder injury which ruled him out for the rest of the season. But his ability to break away from stoppage, I don't know if we've seen that since that 2020 season. Here, Clayton Oliver, happy to wrestle with him. And Rao, watch his turn of foot here. His ability to know that this is going to Jeffrey and to break out of stoppage. Most of his centre clearances, 9 in total, were out the front where he was just bursting away. Here, he just takes the ball under the arm, drives out of stoppage and delivers it inside forward 50 on the burst. Clayton Oliver had absolutely no chance keeping up with him, and I just think this is incredible signs from someone that's had such tough runs with injury at times, and I think we're finally starting to see the best of Matt Rao, and I was super impressed with him today.
Well, Miller and Rao, really the two big improvers off the last 18 months to where they were today. But it takes us to the Demons, who, on the flip side, really were nowhere near their best. Brad Green was on SEN before the game saying that he's confident that they can be finals contenders year in, year out, and that there's no sort of hangover in terms of what the cultural reset was over the summer. But today they were nowhere near it on the field, and their disposal was terrible. Yeah,
well, their disposal was almost as good as their pressure, and we're seeing some of their disposals at the moment which were just woeful. It was their ability to use the ball was really, really impacted, and at times there was no pressure really on the player that made the mistake. So just really inexcusable from players too. We've been so accustomed to see Bailey Fritsch take that mark, go back, kick a goal, and just very disappointing. And the thing that compounds errors is errors on top of errors. So you can get away with one and try and clean it up, but there were multiple errors in chains of play where they just couldn't make Gold Coast pay for their errors, and then on the counter-attack they'd go back and score goals against them.
2 10-goal defeats in a row in Melbourne doesn't get that much worse, but how much worse does it need to get for the alarm bells to start ringing for the Demons?
I would say they're probably internally alarm bells are ringing at the moment. I think they sort of thought that they had such a loved-up pre-season. That's what we heard in the whole of the off-season. Everyone had found their love for each other, and nothing tests love more than a little bit of adversity. So it'll be interesting to see over the next couple of weeks how they can get this game back on track. But this season, any team that's been back against the wall has been able to have that bounce back factor. So I think Geelong be a bit wary of Melbourne next week, but they absolutely need to show a lot more than they did this afternoon at the MCG.
An interesting moment in that game just before the end of the third quarter with Will Graham kicking a goal. As you can see, the seconds ticking down there. Did he get it away before the siren went off?
Look, I'm going to say he didn't. I was at the ground. But in saying that, it's when the umpire hears the siren, they're supposed to blow their whistle. So the first concern I have with this, if we watch it play out, On the wide, you can actually see the umpire that's in control doesn't actually even blow his whistle to start with to call the end of the quarter. So it would have been a lot easier to tell whether or not it should have been adjudicated a goal if as soon as that umpire heard the siren, blow the whistle, hand in the air, and you can tell whether that's sort of been disposed of before the siren or after the siren. So ultimately it didn't have any effect on the game, but it was one of those ones that came up that if we have the ability to review it from a score review perspective, should we be able to? Diving back through the rule books, it says we actually can't. So does that need to be something that we look at?
Definitely a talking point. We won't quite call it a clanger then just yet, but it does take us to the rest of our AAMI clangers for this round. And we've had a few guys that have been trying to get off on crimes that they've arguably committed. Stephen May there, absolutely dumbfounded how he's given away the 50-metre penalty after that massive front-on contact. And he wasn't the only one that's been crying wolf, was he?
No, I think the thing we're learning about these clangers is don't trust a player because they're always going to plead innocence. This is a blatant throw from Libba. I would almost say it's the worst throw of the round, and we've still got a couple of games to go. But he was actually defeated by Blake Howes. At first look, looks a little bit suspect, a little bit dubious. Howes tries to also plead his innocence and say that he got a handball. Let's have a look. That is...
Oh, Pappenhausen going to be jealous of that.
Yeah, that's a dummy half throwing it out to their front rower. But, yeah, apparently he didn't throw that, if you ask him.
Well, let's head to the Saints' big win today. And, I mean, the alarm bells for them were ringing at the start of the game. Jack Steele hurting his knee in the warm-up, but they took the Tigers to town, really. It was incredible. Yeah,
they did. It was a huge second half from the Saints, and I think this is probably what we're going to be a little bit more accustomed to seeing from Richmond, being able to go with teams for a half of football, but it was their classy ball users that really came to the fore this afternoon. Brad Hill, Jack Sinclair had 40 plus. He was fantastic. His ability to use the ball. Jack Higgins, really classy finishes from him on the left. A couple of really impressive snaps. But yeah, I think they were able to just ultimately show that they were a stronger team. Mitch Owens, really good performance from him. And the man that finished that one off, Lance Collard, I was really impressed by his game. I love his ability to get up and down the ground, lay some nice pressure and also finish off with some classy goals.
Well, it might be one that regular footy fans gloss over, but Michael Christian will be taking a very close look at this one, namely for two incidents here. So Mitch Owens, a little gut punch off the ball there. I wouldn't expect anything more than a fine, but still one that'll be looked at. But the big incident that comes out of this is a concussion to Liam O'Connell and a push from Ryan Mantle. Now, this has been the buzz one of the pre-season, with a number of pushes resulting in concussions or even a shoulder injury to Mitch Owens. But what's different about this one, which is quite interesting, is Mantle, as you can see there, sort of can see the contest that he's pushing O'Connell into. So Michael Christian spoke on SEN. He said the incident which will sort of break the trend of these players not getting punished will be if the player that pushes the player into the contest can foreseeably see that that player could get a concussion. And it seems that with Ryan Mantle, seeing Tom Lynch, seeing, I think it was Callum Wilkie was a St Kilda defender there, and he still elects to push. There was no way O'Connell was actually going to find himself in the firing line there. Of course, there is a concussion involved. So what that immediately makes us think is 3 weeks is going to be the base penalty, because it immediately makes that impact severe. So expect that one to probably be around 3 weeks. If not, he'll get off altogether, and probably one that Richmond takes straight to the tribunal regardless.
Yeah, and Richmond fans might be watching that and thinking, well, what's the difference between that and what happened to Sam Layla in the pre-season match when Ruben Ginbey gave him a push? And the point that you just made, Xander, the fact that Mansell could actually see the contact that was coming, and you saw him in that last clip. He was open, he saw the contact coming the other way, whereas Ginbey pushed him front on, and the contact was coming from sort of the same direction, if that makes sense, compared to that one. So that is the big difference there, and obviously the concussion, Layla broken jaw, still an injury, a head injury that's resulted from that, but I see those as two vaguely different outcomes for what's going to happen in this one.
Let's go back to Friday night, where it was a furnace at Marvel Stadium, so hot in there, but it's Carlton who really found the heat on them after that. A close game, but still one that the Blues definitely would not have wanted to lose, and it really came down to some crucial last quarter moments for the Dogs.
Yeah, there were some huge last quarter moments in this one, all of which really went to the Bulldogs, which allowed them to get in front and hold on to the lead. This one here, this tackle from Lockie McNeil on Blake Acres, 75-71, and Carlton are looking to go back inside forward 50 here. This mark here, Aaron Norton hasn't popped up all night. Guess who his direct opponent was? Jack Silvani. Guess where he was when that happened? Sitting on the bench in the last 4 minutes of the game. This Bailey Dale spoil here, fantastic come forward pressure. He came from so far away to affect that one. Then steps around two and kicks the ball to O'Donnell, who kicks the sealer. But yeah, a few big areas to clean up for Carlton. Definitely a better showing this week, but I think you have some strong feelings about this. I don't think a better showing gets you far with Carlton fans, and the heat is really going to be on them this week, Xander.
I think so. We'll touch just briefly on a couple of stars that might not have been given that much attention in the lead up to this game. Sam Davidson was incredible. Obviously, Tom Liberatore again, but Davidson, the unsung hero that really came to the fore as well.
Yeah, he certainly is. And I think all of the mid's ability now to just roll up the sleeves, get the job done, learn the position and play the way that Luke Beveridge or their team needs them to play in this tricky period where they've set up definitely. They had Bontempelli for arguably all of the preseason, does his calf in the preseason match. So they've set up a lot of their structures around him playing midfield minutes. And in the last 3 rounds, we've seen the ability of the next man up mentality at the Bulldogs, and they're getting a lot out of their youngsters at the moment. And I think it's a little bit of a watch on how good they can be when these stars come back. And their forward line's firing. Cody Waitman's still not there. So it's very good. It's a lot of hope for the Bulldogs if you're a fan of that club.
Carlton have revolutionised their fitness program in the off-season. They've moved on from Andrew Russell. They've gone to Rob Innes. There's been a big focus on aerobic fitness, but it hasn't helped their ability to run out games. They've kicked just 3 fourth-quarter goals across their opening 3 games. What do you see as the main issue? Is it fitness or is it more of a mental thing for Carlton getting over the line late?
Look, I think it's a bit of both. I think we'll get into a few of the changes that they could potentially make in a minute, but it's that ability to also, when you start to lose close game after close game, you actually start to lose belief in the fact that if a team starts to come at you, that you've actually got enough to overrun them. And the last 3 weeks have kind of shown that they've conceded so many goals. They've only scored 3 themselves. And it's been a real question mark around that. And then you go back to the decisions that they've made in the off-season around fitness and strength and conditioning, and sort of starts to raise a lot of question marks around that, doesn't it?
Yeah, and make no mistake, this Thursday night clash against Collingwood is going to be absolutely massive. From Monday, I can tell you, every sports news camera is going to be sitting outside Icon Park, filming every player going in, focusing on every single second of training they can get. They're coming off a 6-day break as well. Collingwood have the bye. They come up against the Pies, who they've lost 5 of their last 6 games to. There's going to be probably 90,000 people at the MCG on Thursday night. They get Brody Myercheck back in the lineup. It might not be the most consequential game in terms of the way the top 8 plays out, but I'd go as far to say that there may not be more heat on a single game for the rest of the season as there is going to be on this Carlton-Collingwood game, particularly given it's probably the biggest rivalry in the AFL, and on a good day, they feel like 2-3 games worth of points anyway. What do you see as the main areas for Carlton to focus on going into this match to ensure they don't drop to an 0-4 start, which would be a catastrophe? Yeah,
the things that I'm sort of looking at is they need to find some midfield speed, and we saw that. Zach Williams went through there. He had a few centre bounce attendance. He was able to get the ball out and break some lines, but unfortunately then went down with the Achilles injury. He's still unsure of the severity of that, but that was the only real lever that they can pull through there. Their midfield just looks at the moment so one-paced and unable to really break a line. The next one, let's let Jack Silvagni settle in the back line. He had a fantastic game. I touched on it before. His ability to really just close Aaron Norton out of the game. The only time he kicked a goal or took a mark inside 50 was actually when Silvagni was off the ground, which I'll get to in point 4. But let's explore 3 tools. So Harry McGuire, when he does come back, let's persist with Brody Kemp, because he's probably his best game as a forward for Carlton. 5 goals, easily his best return on the scoreboard, and looked really dangerous. And Charlie Curnow, we all know what heights he can hit, and he definitely started to look more like the Charlie Curnow we're used to this week. And that final point, second half fade out. So we've touched a little bit on their fitness. The thing that I'm looking at is the tactical side of things. So in the last 4 minutes of that game, we saw Norton pop up and kick a goal. Silvagni, Curnow and Walsh were all on the bench. They're 3 of your probably bigger role players in the team. You need them out there if you're going to win a game of football. And their percentage and their game time from their mids just seems to be a little bit skewed at the moment. Chera and Walsh only played sort of 66, 67% of that fourth quarter. They're the players you need when big moments are happening on the field.
Let's rewind back to Thursday night, where Essendon snapped an 8-game losing streak against Port Adelaide in what was a huge relief for all the Essendon fans and the players. But it was really encouraging to see some new stars like Sardar Hooley there on the screen, but youngsters as well that really came to the fore late.
Yeah, I think his ability to really inject himself, sometimes playing as a sub, especially on debut, that is no easy feat, but he made an immediate impact. 8 disposals, and then Dersma was also phenomenal with 12 disposals, Redmond 8, Cordwell 7, and Kako, I mean, every time he gets the ball, you just feel like something's going to happen. There's players that are extremely hard to tackle on the field for different reasons. His is purely his agility and ability to just break away from a player that tries to get him. And It was just far better performance from them with and without the footy. We've been pretty harsh on them. I was pretty harsh on them last week. It was a very poor performance. They've been under the microscope from a lot of people during the week, and it was a bounce back. It was a much better performance. I think if Brad Scott had one thing on the board, it was pressure, and they built everything on the back of their improved pressure this game.
You've identified a few moments defensively for Essendon just in that last quarter. They've been criticised so much defensively, but some behind the goals vision here shows what they've been able to do.
Yeah, so pressure on the ball here. So you'll see the Port Adelaide player is kicking overhands to start with, which then means the ball just hangs in the air a little bit. And they've also finally got some shape behind the ball. So Ben McGuire's playing as the +1 here and is just able to affect that kick long down the line. And then this one here, this is exactly the part of the ground you don't want to turn the ball over with. And Port Adelaide have got it here. But their ability to quickly just transition into defence and own the outside of the ground is something that we absolutely did not see last week against Adelaide. I almost guarantee that would have been an end-to-end transition goal because they scored a whole heap of them against them last week, the Adelaide Crows. So even just little changes like quick to react, they were far quicker to react when the ball turned over and far quicker to put pressure on the ball carrier, and ultimately it ended in the success of winning the game.
You spoke about Ben McCarthy being used as a +1 there towards the end of the game. He struggled a little bit earlier in the match when he was one-on-one with Mitch Georgiades, but Brad Scott was able to pivot, put Zach Reid on him, who really succeeded. Talk us through those two matchups through the game.
Yeah, I think it's no denying that Ben McKay, as sort of that key defender, isn't probably performing the way that they want him to at Essendon. Here it's a handover that doesn't really happen, so whether that's communication, whether that's reaction from players up the field, pretty poor, but Zach Reid was able to really put a very good game together and play on Mitch Georgiades, keep him goalless. Just his ability to just work one-on-one, and I think just his turn of foot is a lot quicker than Ben McKay, so we could keep up with him. He could react a lot quicker and then get a fist in, bring the ball to ground, get up, lay tackles and put a whole lot of pressure on Georgiades. So whilst it was McKay's probably, it was pretty poor in the first term, let's be honest. There's no sugarcoating it, but Zach Reid really put some good performances together in the quarters 2 to 4 to really clean up his act and help with getting Georgiades out of the game.
You mentioned McKay not playing his best footy in the first quarter, and unfortunately it was the Bombers fans at the ground who let him know about that the most. Bronx cheers for Ben McKay in what was really an ugly moment. And Corey McKernan, the former North Melbourne and Carlton superstar, coming out and discussing his own experience with that. He talks about being booed. It's easy to deal with, but Bronx cheers off your own fans is next level. Carlton fans Bronx cheering me against Essendon in 2002 after the game left me in tears. Keep in mind, Corey McKernan won the best and fairest for Carlton in 2002 and had a great year, but it just speaks to just how damaging that can be to a player's mental health, the confidence on field. Talk us through, if you're Ben McKay, what you're going through right in this very moment after that game, that performance, but the Bronx cheers from the fans.
Yeah, look, I don't think there's any denying if you ask Ben McKay if he's playing his best football, he'd be the first to say that he wasn't. And I think it's clear that his role at Essendon and what he's trying to do isn't quite working the way that they'd hoped. However, I think the Bombers fans should probably need to take a pretty good hard look at themselves after that game, because that's pretty disrespectful. It's very damaging behaviour to a player that is going out and putting his best foot forward for the club. He's doing everything he can to improve his performance. No player goes out there trying to not play a good game or let the team down in any sense. And in the first term, it got better as the game went on because Essendon were in the game, but it looked like at the start of the game, Georgiades was really going to take hold of it. He's going to make the game his own. They were able to change some things around the ball. The ball coming in isn't just a result of the one-on-one defence either. It's a lot to do with up the ground. They put a lot more pressure up the ground as well, which affected the kicks coming in. But I just think it's pretty disgusting behaviour from Essendon fans to turn on one of your own like that. You're expecting to cop it from opposition fans, but never your own fans. And I just think that was, pretty poor behaviour from them.
Well said. We'll have a look to the rest of the games for the round that are coming up on Sunday, and just 2 this week. Got the Adelaide Crows v North Melbourne at Adelaide Oval in what could be a really coming-of-age game for North Melbourne if they can put forward a good performance against a team that's been so strong early in the year. And who would have thought that the derby would be a battle of the cellar dwellers after a much hyped pre-season for Fremantle, West Coast v Freo, and a couple of big names at West Coast that have a point to prove, namely Harley Reid.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. I think Harley might have a little bit in store for everyone. We've seen a bit of it already, but I think he's going to let his football do the talking this weekend, and I'm actually expecting a very good Western Derby or Derby, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm expecting a big performance from him.
Well, plenty left to unfold over Sunday for the rest of the round, but that's been the round so far. Thanks, Kate, for joining us, and thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you next week. Thanks to Amy as well.